Thank you. Welcome to tonight's meeting of the Committee of Adjustment. Ms. Murray will read our preamble this evening. I'll hand it over to you, Ms. Murray.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good evening. Tonight's Committee of Adjustment hearing is being held by video conference and live streaming video on the town's live stream webpage at oakville.ca. This is a hearing to consider applications for minor variance and consents held under the authority of the Planning Act. Please keep in mind the intent of the process is to review the application that is before the committee, listen to the evidence, and then make a decision. This process is not intended to be used to resolve any concerns or disputes that may exist between the town, individuals, or organizations. If a request for a deferral is made, the committee grants such a request, the applicant or authorized agent must contact the Secretary Treasurer to schedule a new hearing date. In order to conduct an effective and efficient electronic hearing, we have adopted the following process. If you're watching the live stream of this hearing on oakville.ca and you wish to speak to an item on the agenda, you can call 905-815-6095. Again, that's 905-815-6095. The phone number is also posted on your screen below the live stream at oakville.ca. Staff will be standing by to take your call. When you call in, staff will ask your name, item number you wish to address, and your telephone number. Further instructions will be provided for you to call back to join the video conference. When the chair of the committee polls for interested parties, the Secretary Treasurer will unmute you when it is your time to speak. The applicant or agent will be given the opportunity to briefly explain to the committee the basis of the application and answer any questions that may arise. A maximum of 5 minutes will be provided for a presentation. You will need to state your full name and address for the record. Any submissions beyond the 5 minutes will be at the discretion of the committee. All delegations must also state their full name and address for the record. A maximum of 5 minutes will be provided to make your presentation. All remarks, questions are to be identified to the chair. Any submissions beyond the 5 minutes, again, will be at the discretion of the committee. The applicant or the agent will then be provided with a further 5 minutes to respond to the comments made by any interested parties and answer any questions from the committee members. If the applicant or the agent has any concerns found in the staff report, particularly with any proposed conditions, this is your opportunity to advise us, please. The matter will then be taken into committee for a decision. This will mark the end of all discussion. Any person desiring a notice of a decision for an application must provide a written request, preferably through email, to the Secretary Treasurer. Please note that you must make a written request in order to be included on the list that's used by the Ontario Land Tribunal for the giving of any subsequent notice of any appeal. Written notice of the committee's decision will be mailed not later than 10 days for minor variance and 15 days for consents to the applicant and or agent and any other person who filed a written request for such notice. If you do not agree with the committee's decision, you may appeal this to the Ontario Land Tribunal. The last day to appeal the decision to the Ontario Land Tribunal will be noted on the decision. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Murray. Tonight we have regrets from Ms. McHale, our chair. Could I ask if there are any declarations of pecuniary interest? Seeing none, I'll move on to requests for deferral or withdrawal of applications. Do we have any requests for deferral or withdrawal?
Yes, there's a hand raised. I'll just move them into the meeting.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm moving Rochelle Blocker into the meeting.
Ms. Blocker, thank you. Could I have your name and address for the record?
It's Rochelle Blocker, And my address is 84 Sandra Crescent in Grimsby, Ontario.
And which file are you here to speak to?
1355 Warwick Avenue.
That's CAVA 066 2022.
Correct. Yep.
And your request?
And the owner has decided to withdraw his application.
For all of the application, any questions from the committee? And excuse me, everybody in support of this request for withdrawal? Withdrawal accepted. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other requests for deferral or withdrawal of application?
I don't see any at this time.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Secretary Treasurer. On that, then we'll move on to the first item on the agenda, and that would be CAVA 060 of 2022 at 367 Sawyer Road.
Okay, I'm just moving Mr. Moore into the meeting.
Mr. Moore?
Yep, just turning on our video. Can you hear us okay?
Excellent. We can hear you and see you. Could we have your name and address for the record, please?
Yep, my name is Dennis Moore, and this is my wife, Robin Moore, and we reside at 367 Sawyer Road in Oakville.
And could you, do you have a presentation for today's?
We did have a presentation and we forwarded it along. You have that on file?
Our Secretary Treasurer is just pulling it up right now, and I see it up on our screens.
Perfect. Okay. So first of all, good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the Committee of Adjustment and Town of Oakville staff. First of all, we'd like to thank you for consideration in our request for this minor variance. We have prepared this brief presentation here to walk you through our plans. If you could move to the first slide, please. So the property which pertains to variance request CAVA 022 is our home address of 367 Sawyer Road. Proposal to construct structure in our backyard, and we're seeking bylaw 2014-014 and looking to permit an increase in the maximum lot coverage 5% to 27.81%. for a total increase of 29.32 square meters. A brief background on the reasoning behind our variance request. So the property was purchased by the builder, and a new home was built and completed sometime around mid-2019. We are the third property owners, and we took possession of the home in July 2020. We began some backyard renovations in 2021, adding a pool and some landscaping, and with plans to build for both shade and privacy purposes. We applied for a permit to build this structure, and it was at that time that we learned that the footprint of our home takes up roughly 24.9% of the total square footage of the lot. There was a previous variance issued in 2017, which approved lot coverage of 28.52%. However, we also learned that the builder moved forward in building a different home from the plan of this variance. Valid. Next slide, please. So the use case for the structure is to provide protection from the sun and rain during outdoor use, as well as providing a small amount of storage area in the winter and a place to privately change in the summer. The structure would also provide some added backyard privacy for both ourselves as well as the neighbors behind us. Slide, please. And we've gone through the process of getting completed engineering drawings and completed engineering letter of conformance. And in line with the staff's written recommendations, which we recently received, we believe the proposal evaluated against the criteria established is in the build form that is compatible with the surrounding neighborhood. It follows the rules, separation distances, including the bell easement at the back of the property. And lastly, we feel it does not have any negative impacts on the adjacent properties around us by creating any negative shadowing, grading issues, or drainage issues. In addition, we have socialized the proposed structure and plans with the 4 bordering neighbors, and there were no objections, and we have included their location for your reference. Those were the main points of our application, and at this point, we'd be happy to field any questions you may have on the proposal. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Moore. Do I have any questions from the committee before I seek any inputs from registered interested parties? No questions from the committee. Ms. Secretary Treasurer, are there any registered interested parties?
No, there's not, but if you could just read the phone number out again, and then we'll give a few minutes to call in, and then we can take it to motion.
Absolutely. For those watching on Oakville's live stream at oakville.ca, the phone number to call in if you're interested in this matter is 905-815-6095. And right now we're dealing with matter under CAVA 060 of 2022. We'll just give it a moment here.
Okay. I've not received any further calls.
Thank you. On that, can I, if there are no questions from the committee, I'll look for a motion. Ms. Murray?
Yes, Mr. Chair. Having conducted my site visit and reviewed the applicant's written submission, as well as the town's written staff report, which I note that the staff is in support of, having also taken into account the comments presented by the applicant this evening, and noting that there were written letters of support from the neighbors. I note that I am influenced by such, and kudos for canvassing your neighbors. It's a great practice, and thank you. The presentation was excellent. I'm satisfied that the minor variance application meets all 4 tests under the Planning Act, and I'm prepared to make a motion to approve the application for variance subject to the following conditions, which are that the accessory building be built in general accordance with the submitted site plan and elevation drawing submitted with the application on February 4th, 2022, and that the approval expires 2 years from the date of the decision if a building permit has not been issued for the construction. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. All those in support of the motion? Your minor variance has been approved unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Have a good evening.
You too.
Yeah.
So we'll move on to the second application on the agenda, CAVA 016 of 2022 at 207 Allen Street. Do we have the agent or applicant?
Yeah, I've moved Mr. Demchuk into the meeting.
Excellent. Welcome, Mr. Demchuk. As normal, could I have your name and address for the record, please?
Good evening, members of the committee. My name is Paul Demchek. Again, I'm the planning consultant on behalf of the applicant for 207 Allen Street, and my address is 655 Ann Land Street.
Thank you.
And if we could
If you could, do you have you prepared a presentation for this evening?
I do have a brief presentation prepared. I'm hoping Heather can help me out when she has a chance. Thank you very much.
Please go ahead.
Okay, great. So 207 Allen Street. There's a number of variances, or three particular variances, that we are requesting relief from being the flankage side yard, a reduction to the same, increases as well to the lot coverage and floor area ratio. The numbers, albeit appear substantial, and I do want to spend a moment to just walk the committee through each of those. Next slide, please. So 207 Allen Street obviously is located in South Oakville in the East Lake neighborhood. The subject site, as you can see from the site plan, is irregular in shape and is actually one of the smallest lots within the immediate neighborhood. The site currently contains a detached two-story dwelling, and the subject property, just for the benefit of the committee, is also designated under Part 5 of the Heritage Act. So the purpose of the application is to retain that existing two-story structure. Right now, there's actually a one-story addition that was built many years ago, which is intended to be demolished, and a two-story addition at the rear of the existing dwelling is intended to be constructed. So the dwelling proposes a total floor area of 205 square meters with a lot coverage of 36.11. And the proposed addition to the existing dwelling is located obviously at the rear and north side yard of the site. And it does, as you can see from the site plan, it does generally align with the dwelling depth and adjacent dwelling to the north of the site, which is on the left side of the site plan, and also allows ample setbacks from adjacent properties to the north and east. So a portion of the addition is a one-story component, which is carefully designed to provide a built form transition, as well as protect for an existing mature tree that's located on the south side of the property that you can also see on the site plan. The proposed addition provides consideration to protect, obviously, the tree canopy, both within the private property and the public right-of-way. And that addition is intended also to be constructed on helical piles to mitigate impacts on that tree located within the public right-of-way. So I would like to also just point out, for the benefit of the committee, the flankage yard is quite unique, just based on the existing siting of the dwelling. So the existing dwelling actually has a pinch point on that flankage yard where it's 0.58 meters away from the property line. And the proposed addition, obviously in my opinion, is a quite modest addition to the overall built form of the dwelling. But the proposed addition obviously proposes a 0.89 meter setback. So it's greater than what is proposed, but we are dealing with kind of a unique scenario for that flankage yard. Next slide, please. I'd like to take a minute just to show the committee, members of the public, just a few images. So this is the front elevation. Ostensibly, nothing changes from a built form perspective, obviously from the front. You do see a portion of that rear addition on the left side of the image here. Next slide, please. This is the rear elevation. So on this elevation, you can see both the two-story addition component as well as the one-story addition. Next slide, please. And this is the south elevation that I would suggest obviously is most impactful from a streetscape perspective. And obviously there's, in my opinion, there's various built form transitions that obviously are articulated and designed to mitigate some of those impacts. So the two main variances being the lot coverage and floor area ratio, which are asking for an increase to both. I will note that the existing dwelling that exists on the subject property has a lot coverage of 32.5%, and the existing floor area ratio is roughly 48.2%. Essentially, the existing dwelling, as it exists today, would not comply with the lot coverage or floor area ratio requirements of the zoning bylaw, and we're in a position that any addition or any modification to the existing dwelling would obviously trigger minor variances to be in compliance with the zoning bylaw. So in my opinion, the proposed lot coverage and floor area ratio does represent a modest addition to the existing dwelling, and maintains the side and rear yard setbacks that are found within the neighborhood, as well as on adjacent properties. The increase in the lot coverage and floor area does not negatively impact the streetscape. And while it does obviously offer a small expansion to the existing dwelling for the benefit of the homeowners. The second floor of the dwelling has been designed to align, obviously, with the dwelling depth and rear yard setbacks of that adjacent property to the north. And as I noted, it transitions to that one-story component along the southern property limit. And the proposed dwelling addition is sited appropriately relative to adjacent dwellings and does not exceed the setbacks or depths of those adjacent homes. I will also note that the architecture of the home has been carefully considered in terms of its materials, roofline, proportions to ensure any potential massing impacts are mitigated. And I will note my client has been working carefully with planning staff, heritage staff, as well as recently the Heritage Committee in showing these plans and working through the materials, details, as well as the building elevations. Next slide, please. This is just the slide for the north elevation. Next slide, please. And just as a quick summary, so in my opinion, the proposal is considered to be compatible with the scale, height, massing, and architectural materials and character of the established built form that exists within this area. And I will note that obviously the variances, in my opinion, have been designed to mitigate all potential impacts on the streetscape. I noted that obviously my client's been working with heritage staff, and further to that, my client has also canvassed a number of neighbors within the immediate vicinity of the property. And we have shared this correspondence earlier today with the secretary for the Committee of Adjustment for the benefit of the committee members. I do believe there were 5 letters received of support. That's the conclusion of my presentation, and I'm happy to answer and assist any questions for the benefit of the committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Demchuk. If before we go to committee, I'll just, before we go to questions, I'll just remind the viewers of the phone number, 905-815-6095, and ask the Secretary Treasurer if there's anybody who's registered or online to speak to this matter.
I don't see anybody at this time, and no one has raised their hand if they're in attendance.
Okay, and I'll just canvass the committee if they have any questions with respect to this matter. No questions from the committee. We'll just take a moment and give viewers an opportunity to raise their hand or call in.
There's nobody at this time.
Thank you. On that, I'll look to our committee for a motion. Mr. Flemington.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Having reviewed the applicant's written submission, as well as noting that the town's written staff report is in support of the application, also having taken into account the presentation this evening by the applicant's agent, noting that there was no oral objections this evening as part of the presentation. However, noting that there were 5 letters in support of the application received, I would like to move a motion that I am in favor of the application as applied for, with agreeing on the comments that the staff have written in their report. I would like to include the following conditions. Finding that it's minor in nature, meets the intent of the bylaw and the Planning Act. One, that the additions be built in general accordance with the submitted site plan and elevation drawings dated March 2nd, 2022. Second, that the one-story addition be built on helical piers to ensure the tree protection. And three, that the approval expires 2 years from the date of the decision if a building permit has not been issued for the proposed construction.
Thank you. Can I, sorry, those in support of the motion on the table? Unanimously approved. Your application has been approved. Thank you. Have a good night. The next application on the agenda is CAVA 062 of 2022, 415 Golden Oak Drive. I'll take the moment to remind of the call-in number, 905-815-6095. And do we have the agent or applicant?
Hi. Yes, here.
Good day, sir. Your name and address for the record?
My name is Reza Sekavati, and my address is 219 Bayview Fairways Drive, Markham, Ontario. And I'm the authorized agent of the owners.
Thank you, Mr. Sekavati. Do you have a presentation for this evening?
No, as this, our application is just single variance, and I didn't send any presentation, no. But I can explain why the owners request this variance.
Please, if you just
Yeah,
talk us
as
through it a
the,
little bit.
as the work from,
Just for a moment, we can have
Sure.
the drawings that were on the website, we can put them up because we really like to show something for the public.
Sure.
So
Sure.
we can certainly do that. And it'll be the drawings that were on the website.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, as the work from home is trend these days, these owners of this property also, they are working from home and they needed a space to really as an office. And after looking at the house, the only place which was suitable for this new office that they needed was the existing garage. So we came up with this idea that we are proposing a new garage in front of the existing garage in order to use the existing garage as an office, turn it into office. And in doing so, the new garage, the proposed garage is gonna encroach to a side setback, not full side wall of the garage, but only a small portion of it will encroach into the side setback, for which we are asking committee to grant us a relief from the requirement. If you have any question, I'm more than happy to answer.
Thank you. Are there any callers or registered speakers to this matter, Ms. Secretary Treasurer?
I do not see any at this time and no one has raised their hand.
Thank you. Any questions from the committee on this matter? Seeing no one, could I have a motion? Mr. Tulowski?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, move this application be approved as applied for. Find that it meets the 4 tests of the Planning Act. This variance is clearly a result of the odd shape of the property. And I'd note that the garage addition is still set back from the face of the building, finding that to be appropriate. I would note there was no objection from the community. Mr. Chair, there seems to be a glitch in the suggested conditions on this application, so I'm going to move that the approval be subject to the attached garage being built in general accordance with the undated site plan submitted with the application and elevation drawings dated March 6, 2022, and that the variance expires if a building permit does not issue within 2 years.
Thank you, Mr. Tulowski. Any reservations from staff or additional input with respect to the just modification on that first condition?
I don't think I have any concerns with that. Thank you, Mr. Tulowski, for catching that.
So can I please just have the condition read once more?
Condition 1, that the attached garage be built in general accordance with the undated submitted site plan and elevation drawings dated March 6, 2022.
Thank you.
And on that, all those in support of the motion? Thank you. Your variance has been approved unanimously.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Have a good evening. Next item on the agenda is CAVA 063 of 2022 at 200 Morrison Road. While we promote the applicant agent, I'll repeat the phone number again. It's 905-815-6095 for any viewers who may wish to speak to this matter or future matters.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, this is Joel Tanner with the Office of Simple Design Studio.
Thank you, Mr. Tanner. Do you have a brief presentation or prepared comments for today?
I most certainly do. I have a fairly lengthy presentation, but it's fairly simple, and it is in front of everybody. I don't mind walking through it in a very quick manner.
Thank you. That'd be appreciated.
Fantastic. We are sitting here discussing 200 Morrison Road in East Oakville this evening. This is actually a modified design from an original home design we did back in 2018 with approved variances in 2019. We have since reduced the overall size and magnitude of the home, and we have reduced the requested variances. The clients are just simply looking to build a smaller home. So we do have approved variances from the old design. We're now seeking reduced variances for the new design. Sorry, just waiting for the presentation to show up. Can everybody see it or?
Do we have the presentation to come up? I think we're waiting for tech. There we go.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Slide number 2, please. This is the overall framing plan work showing the overall location of the site. Next slide, please. Existing single family dwelling with a full walkout basement and the vegetation in the front yard. Next slide, please. This is the proposed overall scope of the quote unquote 3-story dwelling, which we're looking to build at 200 Morrison Road. Next slide, please. And this is a rear elevation as well as a detached pool cabana. Next slide, please. First variances for front yard setback at 26.77 meters. The current is 56.26. Next slide, please. That is just showing the existing condition. Next slide, please. This is an overall, just showing you how much variation there is on the overall streetscape, and that the new proposed that we're looking at achieving is intact with the neighborhood and the surrounding built environment. Next slide, please. Overall max height rate, we realize the allowable is 9 meters. We're sitting at 10.08. I just want to make the committee aware that we have about 1.1 meters of deviation from the control grade at the front of the property line to the front elevation of the dwelling at the front door. That is what's making up the deviation. So when you actually measure the dwelling at the front door, we're sitting at 9 meters or less. But again, due to technicalities in the zoning bylaw, we are sitting at 10.08. Next slide, please. A trigger that we're looking at here, because of the rear yard and its walkout condition, which is an existing condition on the property, we are looking to have GFA above the second floor. Because it's a walkout, we're now considering the dwelling to be an overall 3-story. So again, 3-story at the rear, 2-story view from the front. Next slide, please. Requested variance number 5 is in relation to the overall depth of the dwelling. Again, we have a bit of variation on the depth of the dwelling. We have a 2.4 meter projection at the front wall, and we have a 3 meter projection at the rear wall. Again, just to provide privacy for the front porch and for the rear porch for the owners of 200 Morrison, as well as the property to the north. Just keeping in mind that that is built into your overall depth calculation, even though they are wing walls. Next slide, please. Requested variance 6 is in relation to the overall garage area. From the front streetscape, we did work with planning staff to allow it to look like a two-car garage. The additional square meter is coming from the rear. It's a tandem design. And again, worked quite closely with planning staff to ensure that they were on board with this proposal. Next slide, please. Requested variance 7 is regards to just the proximity of the cabana to the detached dwelling. It has nothing to do with the cabana itself. Technically, you are supposed to be 2 meters away. We're at 1.27. We are going to be working with conservation staff. They do have a few concerns regarding the overall magnitude of the cabana, as well as a bathroom that was proposed in the cabana originally. So again, those aren't variance issues. Those are going to be conservation issues, and we're more than happy to work with Conservation Halton to ensure that they are satisfied with a revised cabana design. Again, we would not be seeking any further relief from the bylaw on that modification. Next slide, please. So we definitely feel that the proposal is in keeping with the overall conformity of the intent of the bylaw. We did receive the letter from one of the neighbors, which is actually in behind 200 Morrison. So this came from sorry, just double checking, 201 Diane Avenue. So I want to make note that 201 Diane Avenue is in the, it faces out towards the west side of the property, so it is in behind. Diane Avenue sits about 4 to 5 meters higher than our streetscape. There's a massive amount of vegetation between the rear yard of 200 Morrison and the rear yard of the Diane property. So in our professional opinion, the overall scope and magnitude of the project is not going to negatively impact the neighbors' usability of their rear yard, and we're not going to intrude on their yard space. There's a very substantial ravine buffer. So we don't have any concerns with what they brought up with. We had great conversations with the neighbor to the north of us, as well as to the south of us, to ensure that it was in keeping with satisfaction of our direct neighbors, which is most important to us. And I would now open the floor to any questions the committee might have on the proposal. Thanks so much for hearing me today.
Thank you, Mr. Tanner. Do I have any questions from the committee at this point? Nothing from the committee. Ms. McCrae, do we have any people, any participants that wish to speak to this matter?
No, I don't have any hands raised. If we could just repeat the number one more time, just to give the people a few moments to call in.
Absolutely. The phone number is 905-815-6095, and we'll give folks an opportunity, if they're interested, to call in and raise their hands when they've called in. we'll just give it a minute here.
Okay, I don't see anybody at this time.
Thank you. On that, I will turn to the committee. We'll go into committee and do we have a motion? Mr. Flemington.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Having reviewed the applicant's submission, as well as noting that the town staff report is in favor of the application. Also noting that there were no oral objections to the presentation this evening. I would like to, however, note that there was one email of opposition, of which the applicant's agent addressed in the presentation this evening. I would like to move a motion in favor, in support of the application, finding that it does meet the intent of the Planning Act and the bylaws for the town of Oakville, and that it is minor in nature. I would like to include the two following conditions: that the dwelling be built in general accordance with the submitted site plan dated March 15th, 2022, and elevation drawings dated December 7th, 2021, as well as our standard condition that the approval expires 2 years from the date of the decision if the building permit has not been issued.
Thank you, Mr. Flemington. Those in support of the motion? The variance has been approved. Thank you, Mr. Bruce. Oh,
No problem, Mr. Chair. Thanks so much.
Tanner, my apologies. Reading off the screen. Have a good night.
Thanks so much. Have a good one.
For those who are viewing and are interested in calling in, 905-815-6095. We're going to move on to the next item on our agenda at this point, and that would be CAVA 064 of 2022 at 527 Weir Avenue.
Okay, I've moved the agent into the meeting.
Excellent. If I could have the agent introduce themselves and give us your name and address for the record.
Good evening, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. I'm Neelam Bangish, Mehboob Bangish Architects, 8140 Hunby Road, Halton Hills. And I'll be presenting one variance for 527 Weir Avenue on behalf of our client. It's a residential application. And we don't have a formal application, but we did submit drawings. And yeah, we can see it on the screen. So we are seeking relief for one variance for residential floor area ratio. For this particular property, the allowable being 41%, and we are seeking relief to take it to 46% with a variance of 38.42 square meter. And that's the only variance that is resulting from the design for this new house here. There's an existing residential dwelling there that our client who has recently purchased the property is going to demolish and build a new two-story dwelling. We have worked quite extensively, and thanking Catherine especially for it, to reduce the variances from, I think there were 4 variances and down to 1, and that to the extent the variance is greatly reduced in nature. So that's what we are seeking relief from today for 38.42 square meter for a two-story dwelling.
Thank you. Do I have any questions from the committee before we go out to members of the public? Not seeing any questions from the committee. To the Secretary Treasurer, do we have any registered participants or people with their hands raised?
I see no one at this time.
Okay, I will take a moment to repeat our phone number, 905-815-6095, and we'll just give it a minute or two. We'll go.
Yeah, I don't.
We'll
see
go into
anybody else.
committee now. If I could have Ms. Murray, if I could have a motion from you, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Having conducted my site visit and reviewed the applicant's written submission and noting the town written staff report, which I note is in support of the minor variance. Having taken into consideration the comments presented by the applicant this evening, thank you for your presentation. I note that there are no verbal or written objections from the public at this time. I am satisfied that the minor variance application meets all 4 tests under the Planning Act. And of course, it's always appreciated when you work with town staff to the satisfaction of town staff. That's fantastic. I'm prepared to make a motion to approve the application for the variance subject to the following conditions, which is that the dwelling be built in general accordance with the submitted site plan dated March 16th, 2022, and elevation drawings dated March 3rd, 2022, and that the approval expires 2 years from the date of the decision if a building permit has not been issued. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Murray. Those in support of the motion? Your minor variance, thank you. Your minor variance has been approved. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Thank you. Good evening.
So we're moving on to application CAVA 065 of 2022. That's a property located at 241 Douglas Avenue. And while we get the agent situated, the phone number again is 905-815-6095. And I see we have the applicant or agent on. Could you please introduce yourself and provide your address for the record, please?
Yes, we'll do. Hi, my name is Andy Griffiths with Arc Image Design, and I'm located at 1281 Richmond Road in Burlington. So, good evening, Mr. Chair and committee members. I don't have a formal presentation. I think our application is fairly straightforward, and I think the actual report explained it extremely well. There's an existing deck in place that's tucked into the L shape of the house, and basically we would like to cover that porch. It's a little bit bigger than what's there, but it's basically covering that porch so the owners can get a little bit more use out of it. Basically, we're looking for an increase in coverage allowance. That's the only variance we're after. And at the present, the coverage allowed is 19%, and we're looking for relief to get it to 24.8%. At present, there's already a minor variance in place since 2008, which allows 23.19%. So we're looking basically for an additional 1.6% coverage, which is about 16 meters squared. And we're also doing a small overhang at the existing rear door, just for a little bit of protection from the weather. And that's about it.
Thank you, Mr. Griffiths. Do we have any questions from the committee? This is a fairly straightforward situation here. We'll ask the secretary treasurer if there are any members of the public present who have raised their hand or registered to speak to this matter.
I see no one at this time.
Okay. And as I've provided the phone number previously, we'll move forward to go into committee, and Mr. Tulowski has already got his hand up before I get the words out of my mouth. So Mr. Tulowski, motion please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, I'll move that this application be approved as applied for, finding it meets the 4 tests of the Planning Act. I don't believe that the Porch addition will have any negative impact, and I'd also note that even though this is the second coverage variance on this property, it's still coming in at less than what we typically see requested for this zone. And I would also note that there is no opposition. I would make that approval subject to the additions being built in general accordance with the submitted site plan dated March 25th, 2022, and elevation drawings dated March 21st, 2022, and that the approval expires if the building permit hasn't issued within 2 years.
Thank you, Mr. Tulowski. Those in support of the motion? Excellent. None opposed, so your minor variance has been approved.
Thanks very much, folks. Have a good evening.
Thank you.
Take care.
And our next application on the agenda is CAVA 067 of 2022. It's a property located at 449 Ennisclare Drive East. And I will take the moment while the agent gets online to repeat the phone number again, 905-815-6095. And I see that we have the agent online now with his hand up nonetheless. So Mr. Martino, would you like to introduce yourself, provide your address for the record, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. My name is Terry Martino, an architect with Grenweiss Architects and Associates. My address is 341 Kerr Street, Oakville.
Mr. Martino, I'm assuming you've provided us with a presentation for this evening and you're prepared to speak some words to describe the proposal at hand?
I do have, or could provide the committee with the presentation. We've read, I'd like to advise the committee, we've read the comments provided by staff and concur. Proposal is to construct a 1-story garage at the south portion of the front of the building. The variance is as listed. The first variance is to prevent the maximum floor area for the private garage to 73.28 square meters. The existing garage, which presently is located behind this one, presently doesn't work as a garage. And so the client is sort of looking to actually get a functioning garage. So the proposal is to create one, and the additional floor space would be internal to the building. And so presented to the street frontage would only be the 2 doors for the garage. And thus we believe that, the impact on the street is negligible. It'll look virtually the same. The second variance is to permit the attached garage with quite a bit further protection of 3 meters rather than the 1.5 that's permitted from the front face of the elevation. It is also located 2.4 meters from the south property line, which bylaw requires a 4.2 setback in the RL1 zone. A note for the committee that if you visited the site, properties are heavily treed. There's a very large cedar hedge that separate the subject property from the property south. So we believe the impact is minimal. And the yard, obviously, variance required reduces the front yard setback by approximately 1.5. And I'd be happy to answer any questions that the committee may have. Sorry, I should probably add one thing. We purposely created a one-story garage to reduce the impact on the, particularly with the side yard setback. But I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Martino. Are there any questions from the committee? Ms. Murray?
I'm sorry, I'm just trying to follow. Through you, Mr. Chair, to town staff. Just from my experience, is there a reason why the variances are addressed in the inverse?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I think in this point, I felt that to understand some of the rationale for why the variances were appropriate, it felt that it was easier to kind of go in that order, kind of more of a flow of conscience than anything. And the variances are still numbered, so you could still reference them appropriately, but I felt that it was was easier to understand kind of the process in which we got to the appropriateness of the variances in this instance.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Any additional questions? Are there any members of the public who've raised their hand or registered to speak to this matter?
Not at this time. Mr. Martino still has his hand up.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay, on that then, I'll take us into committee. If I could, Ms. Murray, I see you've got your hand up. A motion, please.
Certainly, Mr. Chair, having conducted my site visit and reviewed the applicant's written submission, as well as the town staff written support, which I note that the staff are in support of the variances requested. I note that there are no objections, oral or written, from the public at this time. I'm satisfied that the minor variance application meets all 4 tests under the Planning Act, and I'm prepared to make a motion to approve the application as written, with the following conditions: that the addition be built in general accordance with the submitted site plan dated February 15th, 2022, and elevations drawing dated February 2nd, 2022, and the approval expires 2 years from the date of a decision if a building permit has not been issued. Thank you.
I just would like to add that there was, just wanted noted that there was a letter in support that was received.
Thank you. With that, we'll take this motion, those in support of the motion. Excellent. Your application has been approved. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. Have a good evening.
The next application on our agenda is CAVA 190 of 2021. This is a deferred application from December of last year. It's a property located at 197 Richmond Road. And while the applicant gets situated, I will repeat the phone number for those viewing. It is 905-815-6095. And if you are interested to speak to this matter, please call in and our staff will assist you. Do we have the agent with us today?
We do. It just seems to be a technical glitch that I'm unable to move him into the meeting.
we'll be patient for a moment while staff sort through the technical details, and thank you.
Hello, can you hear me?
Mr. Barton.
Sorry about that. It took a long time for my element to connect as a panelist, so I'm sorry about that.
No worries. If you could please take a moment to introduce yourself, provide your address for the record, and then we'll commence with things.
Yes, my name is Michael Barton, MB1 Development Consulting, so I'm the applicant for this property. My address is 1489 Abbeywood Drive in Oakville, L6M2M6.
Thank you, Mr. Barton, and welcome. I see that you have a presentation prepared.
Well, I believe this is just the plans that were resubmitted to the committee that are being pulled up, so I'll refer to them here.
Okay, excellent. If you could walk us through what the variances are and some of the rationale behind them.
Sure, absolutely. So we had been here earlier in December, actually, we had come forward with this application, and we had a dwelling that we were requesting. The variances requested were to floor area ratio and building height. So I had provided the context in the neighborhood that we had designed this to reflect the fact that we call it what I call a reverse pie-shaped lot. You can see it gets narrower as it goes to the back. So we did have challenges with the calculation of the floor area ratio as a result of that lot area. So we had designed it to reflect the configuration of the property. But we did also hear the concerns of staff about how floor area ratio is used to look at how well a building fits in with the character. There were also concerns raised that the limited amount of floor area ratio variances that had been granted as well. So we took the opportunity to defer the application and go back and meet with staff. So what we did was we looked at opportunities to reduce height of the dwelling. So even though we were asking for variance in height, we were able to bring it down to just 20 centimeters above the maximum permitted, where we were at 9.82 originally. Sorry. Oh, okay. I thought I heard a question. And then also what we did is we made some changes to the floor plans, which allowed us to then reduce the floor area ratio from what we were originally requesting. So we brought those back in. And then I guess a key point to this is it doesn't affect the number of variances requested, but it does affect the character of the dwelling. So what we had done was to provide some more articulation in the building, some changes to how the roof line worked in. So that helped us to bring the height down and to reduce the floor area that was being contained in there. So what we did also do is when we were discussing it with the zoning examiner, we found that the way the calculation was being done is that the floor area ratio was actually a little bit higher than our target was to get to, but we did have a discussion with staff about what the overall design intent of the building was, and our intent to work and to accommodate the building within the overall character of the neighborhood. So I do agree with staff that the variances as requested before you now, as revised from our original proposal, are more in line with the character of the neighborhood, and that I feel that they're appropriate and meet the 4 tests.
Thank you, Mr. Barton. Do I have any questions from the committee at this point? Ms. Murray?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair. There are some notes here, I believe, from staff that an additional variance may be required as the front porch and below grade cellar appear to exceed the permitted front yard setback. Wondering if that might be addressed. Thank you.
Yes, so that is related to the way there's a cellar that's shown in the basement and where you would measure the front yard setback from. So our intent is that we will address that and not seeking a minor variance to deal with that. So I believe it's not something that came up in the discussion with the zoning examiner at the time, but we'll address that through the plans and taking it forward from this point. So we're not requesting a variance to accommodate that.
Thank you. Any follow-up questions, Ms. Murray?
Yeah, follow up. Could Ms. Buckerfield comment on that, please?
For you, Mr. Chair, I think what he's getting at is that at the time of building permit, he'll make sure that the cellar has been pulled in and no longer triggers an issue with the front yard setback and will not require any variances because they can fix it prior to building permit and construction.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And Ms. Buckerfield, just as a follow-up to that, and is there some degree of confidence that there'd be no challenges around our normal approach to substantially consistent with the drawings in front of us? Should this be approved, would we run into a challenge with that?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do not believe that there would be a challenge with that. I think it would be a minor shift in terms of the cellar, and that would be below grade. And I don't see that as being a substantial problem. If you feel more comfortable, you could make the plans to the satisfaction of the Director of Planning, but I think they would fall within that general accordance with the plans.
Okay. And thank you. Any additional questions from the committee? Okay. Was there any members of the public that had raised their hands or registered to speak to this matter?
Okay, there is no one at this time.
Thank you. Okay, with that, we'll take this matter into committee. Do I have a motion? Mr. Flemington.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Having reviewed the application before us and noting that the presentation this evening had no oral objections to it, as well as no oral objections in writing. I'd like to thank the applicant for revising it to address the previous comments. I'd also like to note that my motion does support the comments that were noted in the town staff report, which was in favor of the application. And I want to move a motion in support of the application, finding that it's minor in nature and meets the intent and bylaw of the Planning Act and town's bylaws with the following two conditions. One, that the dwelling be built in general accordance with the submitted site plan and elevation drawings submitted for the proposed dwelling, dated March 21st, 2022. And the second, that our standard condition, that the approval expires 2 years from the date of the decision if a building permit has not been issued for the proposed construction.
Thank you, Mr. Flemington. Those in support of the motion on the table? Mr. Barton, your variance has been approved with none opposed. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Have a great evening. And we'll move on to our last item on the agenda. That would be CAVA 016 of 2022. That's a property located at 228 Mohawk Road. This application was deferred from the February 8th, 2022 meeting. While we wait for the applicant and agent to get situated, I will repeat the phone number. It is 905-815-6095. for any residents or who wish to speak to this matter, please call in at 905-815-6095. And I see that we have the agent online now. So if you could please introduce yourself and provide your address for the record.
Sure. You guys hear me?
Yes, we can.
Perfect. My name is Lucas Cocomello from Show Engineering. I'm here representing the homeowners of 228 Mohawk Road. I'm residing at 2157 Royal Windsor Drive.
And do you have a presentation for this evening?
Well, if we could just refer to the front elevation on the provided architectural drawings, that should suffice. And I can explain what's been going on with this project and why we have to defer.
Yeah, if you can walk us through a little bit of the background explanation of the variance, and that would be great.
Okay, perfect. So just to go over again the background on this project. So back on February 8th, we initially came in and applied for a minor variance for maximum building heights. We initially asked for 10.35 meters, where 9 meters is permitted based on what the zoning bylaw prescribes. After reviewing the comments provided from community planning, it was in our best interest to defer the application to a later date to discuss with planning further on how do we mitigate the actual impacts, the maximum roof height we're trying to propose. How do we mitigate it down to something that's a little bit more reasonable? So we're here today presenting with the revised application, noting a maximum height of 9.75 meters for the actual total building heights. But the one note being that that area of the roof that's exceeding the 9 meters is only 5% of the total roof area on this project. Everything else in compliance is compliant with what the zoning bylaw prescribes in terms of maximum roof heights. I was in contact with the homeowners, and they also did some due diligence in terms of contacting the neighbors within the community to see if they could provide letters of support. And in doing so, they were able to obtain 11 what do you call it? Sorry. 11 11 notices indicating support on the application. And the two neighbors directly beside us on 224 Mohawk and 232 Mohawk also signed off as well, considering that they are also the ones that are directly impacted with the requested variance that we're presenting today. Please let me know if you have any questions or concerns.
Yes, thank you. Yes, I note the staff presentation shows the graphic and highlights the singular point of height exceedance at the main gable. Do I have any questions from committee on this? I see none. Do we have any members of the public who have registered or raised their hands to speak to this matter?
Not at this time.
Okay. And I do want to say that it's great to see the residents out and speaking to their neighbors, and this is it might not be the largest number of letters of support, but it's a significant number of people that are out to support. So I think that's wonderful that you've been out and taken the time to work with your neighbors to build an understanding of this. So well done to you and the homeowners. With those comments being said, I'll turn to the committee. I'll turn to the committee at this point in time and see if I can get a motion. Mr. Tulowski.
Mr. Chair, you stole my thunder. I was going to say not a record, but double-digit letters of support. Impressive nonetheless. Before I give a motion, Mr. Chair, I don't mean to be picking on staff tonight, but I have a similar question to the earlier application. Ms. Buckerfield, the elevation drawings and the site plan that I have, the site plan is undated and the elevations are dated November 8th, 2021, not March 11th, 2022. Is that correct, or do you have a different set of drawings?
I have a November 8th, 2021. So I think that was an error in the report. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. With that, Mr. Chair, I'll move the application be approved. Will be any impacts. I would make the approval subject to the dwelling being built in general accordance with the undated submitted site plan and elevation drawings submitted with the application dated November 8th, 2021, and that the approval expires. And I think there's, I'm going to pause here, Ms. Buckerfield.
Oh, sorry. I through you, Mr. Chair, I just recalled why it's like that. So I put in submitted with the application on that date because this is the same date on these elevations as was with the original application. So they changed them, but the date stayed the same. So I wanted it to be very clear that it was the plans that were submitted on March 11th. So that wasn't confused with the previous plans that had the exact same date on them. If that makes sense with so they had a different set, they had two different elevations that had the same date on them. And the elevations that were viewed with the higher height at the last meeting also said November 8th, 2021. So I wanted it to be clear that we wanted to look at the site plan and elevation drawings that were submitted with the application on March 11th, 2022. If that makes sense.
Okay, I think I got that.
Yeah. So they had they changed the plans, but did not change the date. So both set of plans had the same date, and I was concerned that they could be confused with the previous elevations that were not approved. So I wanted to make it clear that it should be in general accordance with the plan submitted to the town on March 11th, 2022.
Mr. Chair, just try to make it abundantly clear then. Excuse me. Try that again, make the approval subject to two conditions. I'm going to combine it all. The dwelling be built in general accordance with the undated site plan submitted with the application and elevation drawings dated November 8th, 2021, which were submitted on March 11th, 2022. And that a building permit issue within 2 years.
Thank you, Mr. Tulowski. I'll just make sure that the Secretary Treasurer is satisfied that she's got that down accurately.
If you could just repeat it one more. I've got the dwelling be built in general accordance with the undated submitted site plan. And then and then elevation drawings submitted.
Elevation
drawings dated November 8th, 2021, and submitted with the application on March 20. You wanted both dates in there, correct?
On March 11th, 22, correct.
Yeah. But you wanted an elevations drawings dated November 8th, 2021, submitted with the application on March 11th, 2022.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so those in support of the motion? Your application has been approved. None opposed. Thank you very much. Mr. Cocamella. You have a wonderful evening.
Thank you, you too.
Thank you. Okay. Okay, and that was our last item on the agenda. So if maybe we can move to confirmation of minutes from April the 5th, 2022. Ms. Murray? Thank you. And motion to conclude? Ms. Murray again. Thank you.
We just usually read out the time.
Oh, and it is 8:20 p.m. Thank you.
Thank you.